Wonderful. So my name is Hans-Liudger Dienel. I use the first personal name in English, Hans, while I call myself Liudger in German. So I use the second personal name. Dienel is my family name. I am full professor at the Technical University Berlin, which is one of the leading research universities, I would say, in Germany. We have these 11 excellence universities now, special program with TU Berlin being one of it. And I'm a typical STS person. So I have studied mechanical engineering on the one hand, thermodynamics, in fact, and on the other side, history, philosophy, and social science. So these two cultures. I was heading the Center for Technology and Society of my university for more than 10 years. And my chair is called Work, Technology and Participation. So I have my research very much focuses on participatory methods, involvement strategies, and senior applied household technologies play a certain role as a case study, but I'm not, let's say, as you, a typical, let's say, fully devoted to gerontology person, although I have always conducted projects on senior applied technologies from the German Research Agency, once a long-term for 7 years project, and I still run a group of seniors, about 25 seniors between 70 and 90, which test products. So it is called the Senior Research Group, but let's say they are attached to my chair, and I sometimes, let's say, lend them, or they are then hired by companies for one-day tests.
Yes.
So they are somehow experienced now already as testers because they have done it quite often. So they are not fresh testers, but they are much better in, let's say, communicating about deficits than ordinary, let's say, seniors. Okay, so and maybe I'll leave it with that.
Okay, sounds good. Okay.
Well, in my opinion, this is almost 20% of the interview already.
So that is a very important, of course, and quickly growing research field, not only in Korea, but in Germany too. By the way, Sunkyo, what I suggested for the interview now is I would like to at least talk for some minutes about what I would call age discrimination. In many fields, for instance, we have no programs for a startup funding for seniors or so, yeah, and people who retire and then maybe found a startup. We have this only for young people. This is only one example for age discrimination, and as we have the demographic change both in Korea and Germany, I think we should work on that. In other fields, elderlies are privileged, but in many fields, I see, let's say, I see very severe age discrimination.
Yeah, absolutely. Professor Shim, do we need a formal start? Because I believe we are in the midst of the full session, and I'd suggest that you just continue at this juncture about your views regarding institutional discrimination against aging, as you see it, with respect to funding and possibly funding startups and possibly other aspects that have to be resolved in Germany and possibly elsewhere. Hans-Liudger?
Yes. Will you, let's say, in an interview, I would normally now expect a specific question and then I react. Or how do we communicate?
in qualitative interview techniques, you start very open in this sense. So my question would be, what's your stance about how ageist really is the situation of startup funding?
Yeah, well, then I start with this aspect. So I see the situation in Germany and in Europe as follows, that innovation is a term which is more or less limited for young people. So there is only little societal trust in the innovative capability of elderlies. And I see this as a deficit which we have to overcome. So I identify a certain radicality of elderlies. There are some reasons for that. For instance, elderlies have less to lose. Yeah? Their career often is, let's say, past, so it is not so, they do not have to be so much afraid of superiors or so. They are to a certain extent more independent. Of course, they have more experience, that means maybe more wisdom. And I see a certain radicality of elderlies. Sometimes that goes in a rather primitive direction, that elderlies, let's say, criticize in a very, let's say, not in a way that it is, let's say, that the complexity of the situation is addressed accordingly, but often not. So I would envision a society which has more trust into the radicality and the preparedness to innovate of elderlies. I see, for instance, when it comes to startups, that people who retire with the age of 65, for instance, that they still have 20 active years ahead, that they might have the idea to found a startup in a field they have dreamed of, sometimes maybe social entrepreneurship more than, let's say, just making money. And there should be funding schemes and other schemes to, let's say, support these activities. That is, I even identify a certain form of, let's say, legal discrimination when it comes, for instance, to banking, to loans, and so on and so forth, for elderlies. But the main idea is that our image of elderlies should change, and that we should work on us, let's say, to have more trust or identify more the radicality and the preparedness to innovate of elderly.
Break this down into the different strata of agents that should be acting against this kind of discrimination. What should be done on the governmental level, on the neighborhood level, and what can individuals or not do themselves?
So we are talking, for instance, about the entrepreneurial university. Because now every university wants to be an entrepreneurial university. Every university has a center for entrepreneurship. 30 years ago, nearly no universities had a chair or a center for entrepreneurship. This is a new academic discipline. Nobody really knows what exactly they are doing. So the methodology is quite, let's say, broad. Sometimes the entrepreneurship professors come from psychology, sometimes more from technology or management, business administration or so. So it is a mix, but it is, I would say, one of the most successful, let's say, growth rates of academic disciplines within university. And nearly none of these centers is working on elderly. So that is, and they normally at the universities are responsible for running funding schemes for, let's say, entrepreneurship for young alumni, but nearly no activities for entrepreneurship of elderly. Then was talking about the university in a times of demographic change. I think the further education, lifelong education, and this includes activities with elderly, should become, let's say, field of activity of universities. And still, it is very small compared to the, let's say, basic education, bachelor and master programs which we offer for young people. So here I see the opportunity for a change in on the university level, and of course this includes governmental funding programs. But that is only one example. One could give much more examples.
Well, it's been quite some time since I've been that close in touch with German universities, but startup support exists in Korea just as well as in the States, and they are not really scientifically backed up, but they serve as well. There are service institutions for graduates or graduates to be to basically link their acquired scientific knowledge to real practice in the form of founding and running their own enterprises. And at least in the States, there are several examples where entrepreneurs are getting incentives for working on products for older persons. I would believe that the same holds true for Germany, but you seem to be
so now you refer, let's say, to seniors as a target group of entrepreneurship. And that means that young startups, for instance, develop technologies for senior applied household technologies or so. I was more talking about involving seniors as, let's say, actors in startup companies. And this, I think, is for a country with such a sharp demographic change, a necessary change. In Korea and in Germany, I think you have lower fertility rates than we have. And of course, Germany has much more immigration into the country. So we are still growing, although the demographs since some years they forecast that the Germination will shrink, but it is growing because of immigration only, which you do not have not at least comparable to Germany. But we need that for both countries, and I think this is a whole new field because the ideas which will come out of startups of seniors will be quite different and distinct to entrepreneurship, which we see so far. It is a little bit more in the towards the direction of social entrepreneurship, and that is good for society too.
If you think about institutions or institutes that support startups, be it on the university level or be it in the private sector, you cannot really regulate whether they target seniors, older persons as their target market.
No, but at the moment, most programs have a clear age limitation. You have to be under 35 or so in order to be eligible for funding. The European Exist program, for instance, out of my department, my chair, a number of startups derived, let's say, came into being, normally with funding support by the Exist program, that is an entrepreneurship program, which supports dozens, maybe even hundreds of groups of our university, but we have 9,000 staff members, 38,000 students, and research university. And I do not see any programs for seniors. So these programs have a clear age limitation, and so seniors are not eligible. This is only one. Maybe we should not overestimate that, but it is a sign for age discrimination that we have to work again on, let's say, identifying the innovativeness of older people. Although, as an historian, I can say maybe that the old gerontocratic societies, the ancient societies, the Roman societies, Greek societies, Egyptian, Babylonian, these were mostly gerontocratic societies where not the father but the grandfather was ruling the family. And of course, the Senate, you had to be 60 years in the first centuries in the Roman Republic to enter the Senate. So it was a gerontocratic society, and this prevented innovation. So that is what at least research says, that only in the Middle Ages in Europe the situation changed, that the middle age, let's say the 30-year-old, came into power, and not longer not the grandfather, but the father was ruling the family. And this was an innovation boom, which then pushed Europe to become, let's say, for some centuries, let's say, dominant. It is very much due to, let's say, taking the power from the seniors and hand it over to the middle generation. But now we are in a different world. So a senior of today is not comparable to the senior of the past. And I think, so my suggestions reflect on a new understanding of seniors, not a traditional understanding of seniors.
From what I gather is that you would very much endorse what's done in many states in America. For instance, in ordinary applications, you are not required to tell your age, and if there's an age limit for startup funding or other kinds of startup support, actually you could go to court with that, and you'd have a
anti-discrimination laws are formulated in a very, very general way, and of course age discrimination is forbidden by law. But if you now look into details, that the German term is Allgemeines Gleichstellungsgesetz, what is the English translation for that? Anti-Discrimination Act, yeah, in a very general Anti-Discrimination Act. It is mostly used for queer, for, let's say, ethnic, racial discrimination, but to not very often yet to prevent age discrimination. This, I think, is a somehow a little bit neglected a form of discrimination. Of course, I see in democracies, because of the mere, let's say, voting value of elderlies, there is a strong, let's say, privilege of elderlies too when it comes to financial terms, or when it comes to security and safety. For instance, the shutdown, I would interpret very much as a support of elderlies, because they are the risk group and not the young people. And now we have the very strong economic consequences for young people, very much next generation, the loans and so. In order to support more or less the elderlies, which are the vulnerable group in the COVID-19. So not always there is an age discrimination when it comes to health, security, safety, and financial aspects. In our, let's say, democracies, we have a policy in favor of old people and more or less not against, but not discriminating the next generation. Yeah, or climate discussion, next generation has to pay back. But when it comes to entrepreneurs and the innovativeness, we really have an age discrimination, and we have to overcome that. And if we overcome that, we maybe can give a little less money to elderlies in other fields. This is a compensation. That's now a psychological, a social psychological interpretation. I would see this as a compensation for a social discrimination, and we pay them, the elderlies, to keep calm.